She had always loved the way music could fill a room, the way sunlight spilled through windows in the morning, the way laughter lingered in the corners of a house, the way memories seemed to settle in the spaces between notes she walked through, the streets that smelled of rain and coffee and old books, her fingers tracing the spines of novels she had read 1,000 times. Yet each time she read them, it felt new, the way she always felt when she imagined melodies that no one else could. Hear melodies that seemed to exist just for her. The idea of a piano had haunted her dreams for years. The thought of ivory keys under her fingers of chords that could make her cry, of songs that could carry her to places she had never been yet. She had never owned one until the day she walked into a tiny secondhand store tucked away between a bakery and a flower shop. The bell above the door tinkling like it knew her name. The smell of varnish and polished wood wrapping around her as she wandered through aisles of forgotten treasures. She did not notice the clock ticking or the people passing by. She was drawn to it immediately. An old upright piano with scratches that told stories of hands that had played it before hands that had loved it, and perhaps heard it a little. She ran her fingers across the keys, testing the weight of each note as if they would speak to her. They whispered in soft tones that only she could hear. A faint scent of lavender lingered from somewhere, deep inside the frame, and she thought for a moment it was her grandmother who had always loved music, who had sat by her side teaching her the names of the notes when she was a little girl, teaching her that music was more than sound. It was memory. It was love. It was connection. She carried it out of the store with a sense of triumph and tenderness, like she had rescued something that had been waiting for her all her life. She placed it in her small apartment where the walls were bare and the floors creaked with the stories of people who had lived there before. She could imagine the piano filling the emptiness of the space, filling it with her laughter and her tears and the ghosts of songs she had only dreamed of playing at night. She would sit by it for hours, her fingers hesitant at first exploring the black and white landscape of the keys, but soon finding courage, as if each note had been waiting for her to arrive, as if the piano itself knew she belonged there. She played songs she remembered from her childhood, songs her grandmother had hummed as they baked bread together, songs she had heard on the radio in the summer sunlight, songs she made up that felt like secrets she kept tucked into the corners of her heart. The apartment began to feel like home. The walls no longer just walls, but witnesses to her life, to her laughter, to her grief, to her longings, to her triumphs. She felt a connection to something larger, something beyond her own small life. Something that seemed to pulse through her veins and settle in the chords she struck. And yet there was more than music in the piano. There was a sense of waiting, a sense of promise that made her fingers linger on the edges of the keys, as if the piano wanted her to discover its hidden heart. One evening, she noticed a small panel beneath the keyboard, a panel she had never seen before, a faint outline of wood grain that seemed deliberate, as if someone had carved a secret into the very body of the instrument. She hesitated, her breath catching her heart beating with an excitement she could not name. She had no idea what she would find, but she knew that she must open it. She knelt in front of the piano, her fingers trembling as she pried the panel loose. And there it was, a small folded piece of paper, yellowed with age, delicate as a whisper, fragile as a memory. She unfolded it carefully, her eyes scanning the familiar handwriting, the loops and curves that made her heart ache. It was her grandmother's, handwriting a message carved not into the paper, but into the very essence of her life, words that she had left for her without knowing if she would ever read them. Words that promised love and guidance, words that spoke of hope and courage and the magic of music that could connect them even beyond the boundaries of time. She felt tears slip down her cheeks, and she understood for the first time that the piano had been waiting for her, not just for music, but for her own discovery, for her own awakening for the part of her heart that had been silent for too long. She held the note against her chest and played a chord on the piano that filled the room with a resonance she had never known before, a resonance that seemed to say, "Welcome, home. Welcome to the life you were meant to live. Welcome to the music that will carry you through everything that comes next." She played until her fingers ached, until the moonlight streaming through the window painted the keys in silver, until she could feel her grandmother sitting beside her, whispering every word that had been left for her in the quiet of the piano. The city outside buzzed and hummed, And yet inside her apartment, time seemed to stretch and bend around her, around the piano, around the message, around the love that had been waiting in silence until she was ready to hear it. And for the first time in a long time, she felt complete. She felt seen. She felt connected. She felt alive. And the piano no longer seemed old or secondhand, but eternal, as if it had always been meant for her hands, for her heart, for her life. As if it had been waiting across decades, across moments, across memory, just to bring her to this very place where she could finally understand that music was not just music, and love was not just love, and that sometimes the smallest discoveries carried the largest truths. And she knew she would never play the piano the same way again. She would never hear a note without remembering the secret waiting beneath, the keys, the note from her grandmother, the connection that spanned generations, the magic that lingered in wood and strings, and in the space between breaths and notes and memories. And the world would never be quite the same again, because she had found something that would stay with her forever. She spent the next days sitting by the piano, letting her fingers wander across the keys, sometimes pausing to close her eyes and remember the small kitchen where her grandmother had taught her how to measure flour, how to hum while kneading dough, how to make everything ordinary feel sacred. She felt her grandmother in every note, in every chord, as if the music carried her voice across time. The apartment filled with melodies that seemed to come from nowhere, yet everywhere. Melodies that told stories of loss and joy, of hope and fear, of beginnings and endings, that she had never known she could play songs that made her laugh until tears ran down her face, and songs that made her cry until her chest ached, until she felt she could breathe only through the music. She discovered patterns in the piano, the way the wood smelled when the sunlight hit it in the morning, the way the keys felt cool under her fingers and warm when she pressed them too long. She discovered little imperfections that became part of the magic, a key that stuck for a heartbeat like a secret waiting to be revealed, a scratch that caught the light like a memory trying to speak. She felt as though every corner of the piano held a piece of her grandmother waiting to be unlocked. She remembered the summers spent in her grandmother's house, the garden that bloomed in wild colors, the stories told at the edge of twilight, the sound of the wind through, the trees carrying songs that seemed older than the world herself. She thought of all the moments she had not shared, all the things she had not said, all the music she had not yet played, and she felt a quiet urgency, as if the piano was urging her to listen to everything, to feel everything, to open herself completely to the beauty and the pain and the wonder of life. She stayed up at night playing softly, so as not to wake the neighbors, letting the music drift through the air as if it were a bridge to another place, a bridge to her grandmother, a bridge to herself. She wrote in her journal fragments of thoughts about the piano, about the note, about the feeling that she was being guided. She wondered if it was fate, if it was magic, if it was simply love in its purest form. She did not care to know, she only cared to listen to the music and follow the feeling that led her deeper into the stories that had been carved into the piano long before she touched it. Sometimes she imagined her grandmother sitting beside her, smiling and nodding, as if to say, yes, you are ready to hear it. Yes, you are ready to understand the music. Yes, you are ready to feel the way you have always longed to feel. And the more she played, the more the piano seemed to respond to her, the notes bending and stretching like they understood her, the chords deepening like they shared her longing, like they were echoing her heartbeat. She began to see shapes in the music, shapes of memory, shapes of emotion, shapes of life, unfolding as if the piano was painting for her in a language she could only feel and not name. Sometimes she would pause and run her hands along the wood, feeling the grain and imagining the hands that had played before hers. Hands that had loved, hands that had hoped, hands that had left messages in silence. And she realized that the note was only the beginning, that the piano itself was a letter, a story, a bridge. And she had been entrusted with it. She began to dream of composing songs that no one had ever heard, songs that would carry pieces of her grandmother into the world, songs that would speak of her own life, of struggles and triumphs, of heartbreaks, and of joy that filled her lungs until she felt as though she could fly. The neighbors would sometimes hear the faint strains of music drifting into the hallways, and she imagined them smiling, imagining that they felt some of the magic too. She played in the mornings when sunlight pooled on the floor, and in the evenings, when the moonlight made the keys silver in the dim glow of the lamp. She played until her fingers ached and her heart overflowed, until she could feel the music in her bones and her pulse. In the spaces between her thoughts, she laughed when a melody surprised her, cried when a chord reminded her of something lost, and smiled when the piano seemed to speak just to her. Just as her grandmother had once spoken, she began to feel that the piano was not just an object, not just a piece of furniture, not just a repository of memory, but a living thing, breathing with her, breathing with music, breathing with love. And in those moments when she played with abandon, when she let herself feel completely, she felt infinite, as if the piano had unlocked something within her, something she had carried her whole life, something that whispered, "You are not alone. You are loved, you are seen, you are ready." She thought of the note again, and the words that had been left there. Words that seemed small on the page but immense in meaning. She imagined them as threads connecting her to her grandmother, across time, across distance, across everything that had ever kept them apart. And she realized that every note she played, every song she created, every silence between the keys was a conversation with her grandmother, a conversation that had been waiting for her entire life. She felt gratitude so deep, it filled every corner of her being, and she understood that the piano had not simply been a purchase, a second-hand instrument. It had been a gift, a guide, a messenger of love and legacy. She played late into the nights when the city lights blinked like stars and the wind whispered against the windows, letting the music carry her into dreams, letting her dreams spill back into music, letting her heart stretch into places she had never known until she could not separate the music from herself, and herself from the music. And in that blurring, she found peace. She found wonder. She found a profound connection to everything that had come before, and everything that was yet to come. And as she placed her hands upon the keys, she knew that this was only the beginning, that the piano had many stories left to tell, and she would play them, all one note at a time, one heartbeat at a time, one breath at a time, until the secrets carved inside had been spoken into the world, and into her own life, and into the music that would never end. She began to notice how the piano seemed to change. With her moods, how the notes bent differently when she was sad, how they danced when she was happy, how a single chord could echo her laughter or her sorrow. She felt the wood beneath her fingertips as if it were alive, as if it remembered every hand that had ever touched it, every song that had ever been played upon it. And she realized that she was part of that memory, part of that history, part of something much larger than herself. She would close her eyes and imagine the stories of those who had owned the piano before her, the lovers who had played soft tunes in candlelight, the children who had banged at the keys in laughter, the teachers who had coaxed music from reluctant students, the quiet nights when the house had held only the piano and the wind and the shadows, and she felt herself walking alongside them, feeling their joy, their sorrow, their longing, as if the piano had been waiting all these years for her to arrive to understand. To continue its story, she began to play pieces she did not know she had composed them in her mind. In the quietest moments, she let her fingers follow instinct and emotion, and out came melodies that were haunting and tender, that seemed to speak in a language older than words. She could not write them down. She did not need to. She let them live in the air around her, letting them breathe, letting them carry the essence of everything she had felt and everything she had yet to feel. The piano became her confidant, her companion, her mirror, her guide. She could pour every thought, every feeling, every fragment of memory into it, and it would hold them gently, as if understanding, as if nurturing, as if whispering it will be okay, it will be remembered, it will be loved. She would wake in the mornings with the sunrise spilling through the window and play until her fingers were tired, until the notes became an extension of her own heartbeat, until she felt she could not contain the music inside her any longer. She imagined her grandmother smiling from somewhere beyond time, smiling at the way she had embraced the piano, at the way she had discovered the secret that had been left for her, at the way she was living fully in the music and in life. She felt a courage she had never known, a tenderness. She had never known a love she had never known. The piano had unlocked her own heart, and in unlocking it, she had discovered something eternal, something beyond words, something that existed in the spaces between sound and silence, between memory and imagination, between her and her grandmother and the world itself. She played at night with the city asleep, letting the wind through the window carry the notes across rooftops and alleys, imagining that somehow the music would reach others and touch them as it had touched her. She felt connected not just to her grandmother, but to the universe itself, to the pulse of life, to the rhythm of existence, to the threads that tied every person, every memory, every melody, together into a tapestry that was vast and intricate and endlessly beautiful. Sometimes she would pause and simply rest her hands on the keys, listening to the echo of her own heartbeat, mingling with the echoes of the piano. The silence between notes full of meaning, full of possibility, full of love. She knew that this piano had chosen her as much as she had chosen it, that it had been waiting patiently through decades for the exact moment she would be ready to receive it. She felt gratitude, swelling inside her, gratitude for her grandmother, for the music, for the world, for herself. And she played with a joy that was quiet, but immense, a joy that filled every corner of her being and spilled beyond it into everything she touched. She imagined all the moments of her life before discovering the piano, the small achievements, the ordinary days, the sorrowful nights, and realized that every one of them had led her here. Every step, every misstep, every laughter, every tear had prepared her to meet this gift and embrace it fully. She began to dream bigger, to imagine music that could change the world, that could heal hearts, that could bridge distances, that could carry the essence of love and memory across generations. She felt herself becoming a storyteller in notes, in chords, in melodies that spoke of everything words could not capture, and the piano was her instrument, her medium, her voice. And she knew in the quietest parts of her soul that this was what she was meant to do, that this was why she had been here, that she had been chosen for this moment, this journey, this life. And she would honor it with every note she played, every song she created, every silence she allowed to breathe. And as she leaned into the piano, letting her entire being flow through it, she realized that the secret carved inside the wood was only a beginning, only a doorway, only an invitation to live fully, to feel deeply, to connect across time and space, to love without fear. And she understood, for the first time, that music was more than sound, more than art, more than entertainment. It was life, it was memory, it was love. It was the bridge that connected her to her grandmother, to herself, to the world. And she would carry it with her always, letting it grow, letting it change, letting it shape her, letting it guide her, letting it speak when she could not. And in that realization, she smiled, tears streaming down her face, and played a chord that resonated through the room, through her body, through her heart, and she knew that everything had changed forever, and that she had finally come home. The days following her discovery of the note felt different somehow, as if the world had shifted its axis, and she found herself moving through it with a new awareness. Each morning, the sunlight seemed warmer, each sound seemed clearer, each scent more vivid. And when she sat by the piano, she felt a presence more tangible than ever, a presence that was gentle but insistent, that urged her to listen more closely to the music, to the notes, to the spaces between the notes, to the message that had been left for her. And as she played, she began to notice patterns hidden in the piano patterns that felt deliberate, as if her grandmother had left little clues in the wood, in the keys, in the resonance itself. A melody here, a pause there, a subtle accent that seemed to whisper a word, a phrase, a thought she did not understand at first, but that she felt in the depths of her heart like a memory she had not lived yet, and one evening as the rain tapped softly against the window, she leaned closer to the piano, tracing her fingers along the carved edges, noticing the fine scratches and faint indentations that had always been there. And suddenly, a thought came to her that the message was not only on the paper, that perhaps her grandmother had left more, that she had hidden something inside the piano that required patience and listening and intuition. She spent hours searching, pressing keys, softly lifting panels, examining every corner and every crevice. And then she found it, a small hidden compartment behind the music stand, cleverly disguised as part of the woodwork. And when she opened it, her breath caught, because inside there was a collection of letters written over decades, letters folded and tied with ribbons, letters that smelled faintly of lavender, and old paper letters that carried a lifetime of love and wisdom and memories. She carefully unfolded the first one and began to read the words that seemed to float from the page into her soul. Words that spoke of her grandmother's youth, of the music that had shaped her life, of the choices she had made, of the joys she had known, and the sorrows she had endured. Words that spoke directly to her as if she were the only person in the world. Letters that reminded her that life was fragile and precious, that love was eternal, and that the music she carried in her own heart was a gift meant to be shared. She felt tears rolling down her cheeks as she read each line, savoring the texture of the paper, the scent of the ink, the cadence of the words, and she realized that her grandmother had been leaving her a map, a guide, a legacy not in gold or jewels, but in wisdom, in love, in music, in connection. And she understood that she had been chosen to continue this story, to take the lessons and the love and the melodies and carry them forward into her own life and beyond. And as she read the letters, she began to notice something extraordinary. The melodies she had been playing on the piano for weeks began to echo the phrasing of the letters, the pauses in her music, matching the pauses in her grandmother's writing, the crescendos and decrescendos reflecting the highs and lows described in the letters, the piano and the letters conversing across time as if her grandmother had known she would one day sit here and listen and understand. And she wept and laughed and played simultaneously, letting the notes pour out of her and into the room and into herself. And in that moment, she understood the true magic of the piano, and the letters, the way they connected generations, the way they carried love and memory, the way they whispered truths that were too profound for ordinary speech. And she spent days and nights absorbed in this new discovery, reading letter after letter, playing melody after melody, feeling herself entwined with her grandmother in ways she had never imagined. The city outside carried on in its usual rhythm, but inside her apartment time seemed to stretch and fold around her. And the piano she had thought she had known so well revealed more with each note, more with each letter, more with each quiet breath she took, listening to the resonance that seemed to vibrate not only in her ears, but in her chest, in her heart, in her soul. And she began to feel a transformation taking place within her, a transformation that was gentle, but undeniable, that made her more patient, more compassionate, more aware, more alive. She saw the world differently, noticing the small miracles in everyday life, the laughter of children, the patterns of clouds, the smell of wet earth, the hum of distant traffic. And she realized that all of this was music too. Music waiting to be noticed, to be felt, to be appreciated, to be woven into the larger symphony of life. And as she continued to explore the letters, she found stories she had never known of. Her grandmother's youth, of her dreams and disappointments, of the music that had carried her through difficult times, and she felt gratitude and awe that someone she had never seen in those moments could guide her now through the labyrinth of her own feelings and experiences. And sometimes she would stop and close her eyes and imagine her grandmother sitting beside her as if she were in the room, the presence tangible, the warmth of her spirit surrounding her, and she would play the melodies she had discovered in the letters, letting her own emotions blend seamlessly with the memories and intentions of someone who had come before her. And she began to understand that this was the power of love and music, combined, a power that transcended Time that could heal, that could inspire, that could connect, that could transform, that could carry the essence of a life lived fully, and that she had been entrusted with it. And she would honor it by playing, by feeling, by living, by remembering, and by sharing in ways both big and small. And the piano became a vessel for all of this, for all of her own emotions, for all of her grandmother's wisdom, for all the connections that bound them, for the invisible threads that wove through generations, carrying stories, carrying songs, carrying love. And she felt a sense of purpose, a sense of destiny, a sense of being exactly where she was meant to be, at exactly the right moment. And each evening as she played, she imagined the music traveling beyond, her apartment beyond the city, beyond her own life, touching others in subtle and profound ways, inspiring them, comforting them, moving them in ways they could not articulate. And she felt humbled and empowered all at once. That something so simple as music and letters could hold so much power and meaning, and she began to compose her own pieces, inspired by the letters, blending her own experiences with the guidance of her grandmother, blending sorrow and joy, blending fear and courage, blending life and memory. And the piano became a living archive, a diary, a bridge, a home, a place where all of this could coexist. And she played and she played and she played, letting every note carry intention and emotion, letting every pause carry reflection, and letting every chord carry love and understanding. And she felt herself growing into the role that had been prepared for her all along, the one who could listen, who could feel, who could connect, who could carry the torch, who could let music speak, what words alone could never convey. And each night she placed the letters gently back in their compartment and kissed them, as if thanking her grandmother for every word, every lesson, every note, every breath. And she understood that this was a beginning, not an end, that the piano and the letters and the music and the love would continue to evolve as long as she was willing to listen and willing to feel and willing to live fully. And the secret carved into the piano, the note, the letters, the melodies, all became a symphony of memory and emotion that pulsed through her veins, that resonated in her heart, that whispered, "You are not alone. You are loved, you are seen, you are ready." And she realized that the discovery of the secret was more than just a hidden message. It was a key, a doorway, a revelation that would shape her life forever. She began to notice the small details in the letters, the way her grandmother's handwriting curved gently at the edges, the way certain words were emphasized, by underlines or loops, the way little sketches appeared in the margins, tiny drawings of flowers or musical notes or patterns that seemed to mirror the melodies she had been playing for weeks. And she realized that every detail had meaning, that every curve, every mark, every space had been placed intentionally, as if guiding her not just through the message, but through the act of noticing, through the act of feeling, through the act of being fully present. And she felt a shiver of awe run through her, that someone she had never known so intimately could speak to her now. With such clarity across decades, she began to play the melodies inspired by the letters in a way she had never played before, letting her fingers follow the nuances in the handwriting, letting the rhythm of the words shape the rhythm of the music, letting the spaces between sentences guide the spaces between notes. And the effect was extraordinary. The music seemed to lift from the piano, filling the room and spilling beyond it into the city outside. She imagined it touching windows of strangers, carrying comfort or joy or nostalgia or longing. She imagined lives being quietly altered by the vibrations she had released, as if the love embedded in the letters and the music could extend beyond her small apartment and ripple outward in ways she could not measure or see. And she felt a profound sense of responsibility, a responsibility to honor the messages, to honor the legacy, to honor the connection. And yet it was not a burden. It was a privilege, a gift, a calling, and she embraced it fully. She spent nights reading and playing in tandem, letting the words and the notes converse within her, letting her own voice blend seamlessly with the voice of her grandmother, letting memory and imagination intertwine in a tapestry of sound and feeling. She began to understand the rhythms of life and death, the patterns of love and loss, the subtle harmonies that connect generations. And she realized that this piano and these letters were not simply a bridge to her grandmother, but a bridge to herself, to the deepest parts of her own heart, to emotions she had long neglected to explore, to truths she had long avoided, and she played and played and played until the notes became extensions of her own breath, until the music seemed to pulse with her heartbeat, until every fiber of her being resonated with the legacy that had been entrusted to her. And in these moments, she often closed her eyes, imagining her grandmother watching, guiding, encouraging, approving, and she felt a warmth that spread through her chest to her fingers, to her toes, to the very tips of her soul. A warmth that whispered, "You are loved, you are capable. You are ready," and she began to weave new melodies, inspired by the old letters. Melodies that spoke of hope, that spoke of courage, that spoke of connection, that spoke of resilience. And the piano responded as if alive, as if aware, as if understanding every intention, every feeling, every nuance. And sometimes she would pause and simply rest her hands on the keys, listening to the echo of her own life intertwined with her grandmother's life, listening to the echo of the music of all who had ever touched the piano. And she realized that this was a living history, a history of emotion, of experience, of love, of memory, of sound that transcended time and space. And she felt humility and awe that she could be a part of it, that she could play her own chapter into this ongoing story, that she could contribute her own notes to the symphony that had begun long before she was born and would continue long after she was gone. She imagined future generations discovering these same letters, discovering these same melodies, discovering her own notes intertwined with her grandmother's. And she felt a continuity, a lineage, a legacy that extended endlessly, like threads of light weaving through the darkness. And she played with a new depth, with a new reverence, with a new joy, letting the music carry both sorrow and hope. Letting it speak when words could not, letting it heal. When words failed, letting it connect. When distance and time had separated, and she realized that the true gift of the piano was not the music itself, nor the letters alone, but the ability to feel fully, to connect deeply, to live intentionally. And she felt gratitude swelling within her, gratitude for her grandmother, for the life she had inherited, for the love she had received, for the music that could speak what words could not. And she began to write in her own journal reflections, inspired by the letters, reflecting on her own life, reflecting on the lessons she had learned, reflecting on the love she had felt. And she realized that she was now part of a chain of love and memory, and that her life and music would continue to carry the voices of those who had come before and those who would come after. And she felt a responsibility to nurture this gift, to protect it, to honor it. And she began to plan pieces that would carry this legacy into the future, compositions that blended her own life experience with the wisdom of her grandmother. Compositions that spoke of hope, of resilience, of love, of the quiet miracles that fill ordinary days. And she understood that the piano and the letters had awakened something within her, something she could not have discovered otherwise, something that would guide her for the rest of her life. And each evening, she sat down to play, feeling the resonance of history and memory in every key feeling, the weight and lightness of love in every note, feeling the bridge between generations in every chord. And she knew that she was exactly where she was, meant to be doing exactly what she was meant to do. And as the night deepened and the city slept, she played melodies that carried gratitude, that carried hope, that carried love, that carried the essence of her grandmother and herself. And she realized that the discovery of the secret had changed not only her understanding of the piano, but her understanding of life, of connection, of emotion, of memory, of music. And she embraced it fully, letting every note, every chord, every pause become an affirmation of love, of life, of legacy, of the unbroken chain that tied her to her grandmother and to all who had loved before. And she smiled through tears and played and played and played, letting the music and the letters and the connection continue to unfold within her and through her. and she knew in the deepest part of her soul that the journey had only just begun, and that the piano and the hidden messages and the music and the love would guide her through every moment that remained and every note she would ever play. The mornings after she had spent nights immersed in the letters and the music felt sacred, as if the world itself paused to witness the unfolding of something profound. She would wake to the sunlight spilling softly across the floorboards, the air scented with the faint hint of rain and lavender, and the presence of the piano waiting patiently for her to return to it. And when she sat down, she felt a new kind of connection, a connection that went beyond memory and melody, that reached into the core of her being and resonated with every heartbeat, every breath, every fragment of emotion she had ever carried. The letters had revealed truths that she had never known, truths that were hidden in plain sight, truths about resilience, about love, about the delicate balance between sorrow and joy. And she felt her own heart expanding with each note she played, each word she read, each melody she composed. She realized that the piano was no longer simply an instrument. It was a companion, a guide, a portal to a world of feeling that she had only glimpsed before, a world where time bent and memory lived and love flowed endlessly through every chord. And she began to imagine her grandmother watching from somewhere, beyond the veil of life, smiling approvingly, encouraging her to follow the music, to let it lead her to places she had never imagined. And she understood that the secret carved in the piano had never been about a hidden message alone, but about awakening her to the infinite possibilities that life held when one chose to listen, when one chose to feel, when one chose to connect fully with love and memory. She began to share the melodies she had discovered with friends and neighbors, playing softly, at first letting the music drift through open windows, carrying solace and joy, carrying whispers of a grandmother's love. She saw eyes light up, smiles, soften hearts open, and she realized that the piano and the letters were not only a bridge to her grandmother, but a bridge to the world itself, a way to touch lives, a way to speak the unspeakable, a way to leave echoes of love in spaces that had never known it before. She composed pieces inspired by the letters, blending her own experiences, blending sorrow and hope, blending the past with the present, blending life with memory, and the melodies became a living tapestry, a story of generations, a testament to love that transcended time. She felt a quiet pride that she had been chosen to continue this legacy, that she had been entrusted with a gift that required not only listening and feeling, but also courage and dedication. And as she played, she felt a sense of completeness, a sense of peace, a sense of home that she had never known before. And she began to write letters of her own letters that captured her experiences, her discoveries, her reflections, her gratitude. And she placed them carefully in the same hidden compartment, imagining a future where someone else might discover them, feeling a thrill of connection and continuity of love that stretched across decades. And she understood fully that the piano was not a relic of the past, but a living instrument that would carry the essence of all who touched it, all who loved it, all who played it with intention and heart. And in these moments, she felt a transcendence, a merging of past, present, and future, where each note, each pause, each breath became part of a greater whole, part of a story that would never truly end. She played late into nights when the city lights blinked softly like distant stars, imagining the melodies traveling unseen, carrying comfort, carrying hope, carrying whispers of love across rooftops, across streets, across lives. And she understood that her own journey had become intertwined with that of her grandmother in a way that was both tangible and ethereal, that the music they shared was a dialogue across time, a conversation that would continue through her hands, through her heart. Through the very essence of her being, she began to explore new compositions, more daring, more complex, more infused with the depth of feeling she had cultivated over weeks and months. She allowed herself to take risks, to let the music speak without constraint, to let it express grief and joy, longing and fulfillment, love and loss in ways words could never achieve. And as she played, she felt her own spirit soar higher and higher, lifted by the resonance of legacy and memory and love and the Apartment became a sanctuary, a temple, a sacred space where every note was a prayer, every chord a meditation, every melody a testament to life itself. She would often pause and close her eyes, feeling the vibrations travel through her body, through her soul, imagining her grandmother nodding encouragingly, imagining her presence warming the room, and she felt a courage that went beyond fear, a joy that went beyond happiness, a love that encompassed everything and everyone she had ever known. Or imagine she shared some of the melodies with her closest friends, inviting them to play, to feel, to connect, to listen to the echoes of her grandmother's life and wisdom. And she saw how music could open doors in hearts that words could not, reach how it could heal, how it could inspire, how it could create bonds invisible yet unbreakable. And she realized that the piano and the letters had given her not just music, not just connection, not just memory, but a mission, a purpose, a way to live fully and intentionally, to honor the past, to cherish the present, to shape the future. And she embraced it with her whole being, and she began to envision a series of compositions, a collection that would encapsule. She had learned everything she had felt, everything she had inherited, a symphony of love and memory and hope and courage. And she knew that this was just the beginning, that the piano would continue to reveal new secrets, new melodies, new insights, as long as she remained open to listening and feeling. And as the nights deepened and the city slept, she played with abandon, letting the music flow through her fingers into the air, into her heart, into the hearts of others, letting it speak when words failed, letting it heal when words could not, letting it carry the whispers of generations. And she smiled through tears and laughter, and she knew that she was forever changed, that she had discovered not only the piano and the letters, but herself, that she had discovered the infinite capacity to love, to feel, to create, to connect. And she felt peace, knowing that the secret carved into the piano, the letters, the melodies, the love would continue to guide her, to inspire her, to transform her life and the lives of those who would listen. And she played on letting every note be a testament, letting every pause be a reflection, letting every chord be a bridge. And she understood that this was the true gift that had been waiting for her, the gift of music, the gift of connection, the gift of love, the gift of legacy, the gift of life fully lived. And she played and played and played, letting the world fall away, letting only the music remain, letting only the love remain, letting only the legacy remain. And she knew in the depths of her soul that the story would continue long after she was gone, long after the notes faded, long after the letters were hidden again, that the music of her grandmother and herself would echo forever, through the hearts of those who would hear it and feel it and live it. And she smiled and wept and laughed and played into the night.